In the spring of 1453, the people of Europe felt something shift, not in their fields, not in their markets, but in their certainty. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood as the last shield of Rome, a city of emperors, a city of faith, a city whose walls had repelled Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, and Rus. Then, in 53 days, it fell. Cannons thundered, walls collapsed, and a young sultan rode through the broken gates of the ancient capital. From that moment forward, Europe no longer faced scattered tribes. It faced an empire that would dominate 3 continents, command the richest trade routes in the world, and stand at the gates of Vienna itself. This is the story of how a frontier principality became the most feared superpower of its age. To understand Ottoman power, we must first understand the world they entered. The 13th century was an age of collapse. The Mongol invasions had shattered the Islamic heartlands. Baghdad, once the jewel of the Abbasid Caliphate, was sacked in 1258. The Seljuk Turks, who had ruled much of Anatolia, were fragmenting. The Byzantine Empire, heir to Rome, was a shadow of its former self. Its territory had shrunk. Its treasury was strained. Civil wars weakened it from within. Anatolia became a mosaic of small Turkish beyliks, frontier principalities constantly fighting for survival. On this unstable borderland between Christianity and Islam, war was constant. Loyalty was fluid. Power was earned by the sword. And in this violent frontier, a small tribe led by Osman I began to rise. Osman was not born into greatness. He ruled a modest territory near Suud, bordering Byzantine lands. His forces were small, mostly cavalry raiders hardened by frontier warfare. But Ottoman tradition speaks of a dream in which a great tree grew from Osman's chest, its branches covering the world. Whether legend or later myth, the symbolism mattered. Osman's state was built on 3 pillars: military aggression, religious legitimacy, strategic marriage alliances. He targeted weakened Byzantine fortresses, not strongholds. He rewarded warriors with land and spoils. He absorbed defeated rivals rather than exterminating them. By the time Osman died around 1323, his small principality was no longer insignificant. It was expanding, and his successors would accelerate that expansion with ruthless efficiency. Osman's son, Orhan, did something revolutionary. He turned a tribal warband into an organized state. He minted coins, established a bureaucracy, created standing infantry units. In 1354, an earthquake struck the Byzantine fortress of Gallipoli. Its walls cracked. The Ottomans did not hesitate. They crossed into Europe. For the first time, a Muslim Turkish state held permanent territory in the Balkans. Europe barely noticed at first. That would prove disastrous. In 1389, at the Battle of Kosovo, Ottoman forces clashed with a coalition of Serbian nobles. It was brutal, indecisive in appearance, but strategically decisive. The Balkans were now within Ottoman reach. Christian kingdoms began to realize this was not a raiding force. This was a conquering empire. One of the most controversial and effective systems in Ottoman history was the Devshirme. Christian boys from Balkan families were taken, converted to Islam, and trained for service. The most talented entered the imperial administration. The strongest became janissaries, elite infantry. Unlike European feudal knights, janissaries were salaried, disciplined, and loyal only to the Sultan. They trained constantly. They used firearms early. They fought as professionals. This gave the Ottomans a decisive edge over fragmented European armies still dependent on feudal levies. Europe was still fighting medieval wars. The Ottomans were building a modern military machine. In 1451, a 19-year-old ruler took the throne. His name was Mehmed II. Unlike many rulers of his age, Mehmed was educated in languages, mathematics, military science, and Roman history. He admired Alexander the Great. He studied Caesar, and he had one obsession: Constantinople. The Byzantine capital had withstood sieges for centuries. Its Theodosian walls were legendary. Mehmed brought something new: gunpowder artillery on an unprecedented scale. Hungarian engineer Urban cast massive cannons capable of shattering ancient stone defenses. For 53 days, in 1453, bombardment never stopped. When Ottoman ships were blocked by a chain across the Golden Horn, Mehmed ordered them dragged over greased logs across land. It stunned defenders. On May 29th, the final assault began. By midday, Constantinople was Ottoman. The Byzantine Empire ended, and Istanbul became the new imperial capital. Europe watched in shock. The balance of power had shifted permanently, with Constantinople as its capital. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a frontier principality. It became a state capable of ruling continents. The young city of Istanbul was rebuilt. Palaces rose where rubble had lain. Mosques, bridges, and bazaars reflected a new world order. But the Ottomans did not stop at architecture. They redefined governance. The Sultan was more than a king. He was a supreme commander, chief legislator, and spiritual leader. Under Mehmed II, bureaucracy replaced tribal loyalty, and a modernized military gave the empire unrivaled firepower. The Devshirme system provided administrators and soldiers who were loyal to the Sultan alone, creating a centralized state that could enforce order across hundreds of thousands of square miles. Europe struggled to understand this system. Kings relied on nobility. The Ottomans relied on merit and discipline. No period symbolizes Ottoman power like Suleiman the Magnificent. He inherited a state at its peak, but expanded it further. Suleiman was a warrior and a lawgiver. He reformed taxation, codified laws, and balanced authority between provinces and the center. Under his command, Ottoman forces marched into Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Cities like Belgrade, Rhodes, and Baghdad fell. The empire's reach extended from the gates of Vienna to the Persian Gulf. Europeans called him the Magnificent. His people knew him as Kanuni, the lawgiver. The Ottomans were masters of both land and sea. On land, the Battle of Mohacs, 1526, shattered the Kingdom of Hungary. In one day, Ottoman forces annihilated an army twice their size, securing the heart of Central Europe. At sea, admirals like Hayreddin Barbarossa ruled the Mediterranean. Their galleys patrolled from Algiers to the Aegean, challenging Spain and Venice. Europeans feared Ottoman cannons more than knights. Their combination of strategy, discipline, and technology was unmatched. Europeans watched in terror as the Ottoman shadow stretched across their continent. The Habsburgs, Venice, and the Papal States realized that diplomacy alone could not contain the Sultan. Sieges became legendary. Vienna in 1529 was the first true test of Ottoman reach into Central Europe. Though the city survived, the fear remained. The empire's administrative efficiency allowed it to control diverse populations. Christians, Jews, and Muslims coexisted under the Millet system, which granted autonomy in law and religion while keeping loyalty to the Sultan. This combination of military prowess and political savvy made the Ottomans a superpower no European could ignore. By the late 17th century, cracks began to appear. Internal corruption, stagnant military innovation, and economic pressures weakened the empire. The Second Siege of Vienna, 1683, ended in defeat. A coalition of European forces, Poles, Austrians, and Germans, pushed the Ottomans back. Europe began to modernize. Industrialization and gunpowder armies gave them an edge. Yet, despite setbacks, the Ottomans remained a formidable power. They controlled the Eastern Mediterranean, the Red Sea, and critical trade routes connecting East and West. They were no longer the unstoppable force of the 16th century, but they were still central to global politics. In the 19th century, the empire earned the nickname the sick man of Europe. Reforms like the Tanzimat, 1839 to 1876, attempted to modernize the military, bureaucracy, and legal systems. Yet these reforms faced resistance. The Janissaries, once the Sultan's elite, had become politically entrenched. Nationalist movements in Greece, Serbia, and the Balkans chipped away at territory. European powers exploited weaknesses. Wars, diplomacy, and trade pressures eroded centuries of Ottoman authority. The empire that once struck terror across continents was now struggling to survive. During World War I, the Ottomans allied with Germany. They fought on multiple fronts, in the Middle East, the Caucasus, and the Dardanelles. Defeat was inevitable. In 1922, the Sultanate was officially abolished. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk established the Republic of Turkey. After more than 600 years, the Ottoman Empire ceased to exist. Yet, its influence had already shaped Europe, Asia, and the Middle East in ways that remain visible today. The Ottoman Empire was more than an empire. It was a bridge between civilizations, a center of law, trade, architecture, and military innovation. A state that terrified Europe not just because of conquest, but because of its organization, strategy, and vision.